Thank you. Should I reintroduce or we good? Oh,
Do a short recap.
as a short recap, Denise Duffy here to discuss the housing element for sixth cycle, furthering the workshop and public participation approach for sixth cycle, as required by the state as a community development. Today, we're going to have a presentation that's very similar to our workshop on May 3rd. For those who have not been familiar with housing elements in the past, we'll go over a little bit of that. Introduce the requirements of the city. Talk about a little bit about what your city is, our profile of the city. Discuss sites inventory, which we really like to focus on tonight if we could, in terms of where can the city have housing, where can affordable housing be built. As you probably know, we need to identify sites that would be available for affordable housing to meet the regional housing needs, but we do not need to build them as understand that. And then I would like to talk a little bit about specific policies and programs that may be ended in the furthering what we talked about. So also I'll give a little bit of the background and some public participation. Overall, as I said earlier, we really want to hear from you. This is a listening session for us. I'd like to introduce Troy Lawson, your planner from these Duffy Associates, and here to take notes. Hear from you and take that information in and see how that would be impacted on housing element for six items currently under preference. A housing element is required for the city's general plan, and it must establish a roadmap for accommodating affordable housing. It sets citywide goals, objectives, policies, and programs, which we'll talk about later. Every jurisdiction is required to prepare a general plan, and the housing element is part of the general plan, one of the 7 elements. Typically, other general plan elements don't have to be up to the housing element. Then there's a strict requirement in terms of housing element updating every 8 years. The city is currently in a 4-year cycle. The city's hasn't, other than the December 17, 2019 adoption of the housing element. Before that, this last city housing element was adopted in 1992, even though there was preparation of one in 2006. Further discussion, the city was never able to adopt the housing element, and before that, other than those 2 periods, in the 2019 period, they went through the process, and unfortunately, there was a lawsuit that was filed requiring, even though that was settled or taken out, there's still, adds time and dollars. So what we're trying to do in this 2023 is catch up with the 5th cycle and 6th cycle. And so right now, we're talking about the 6th cycle housing element. And these are the different elements that are required. There's a community profile, background on what our needs are, the map and list of housing sites, housing constraints is a big part of our housing element, review of what past accomplishments the city has made, and the roadmap toward what programs should be developed and maintained for the next housing development. Next slide. So the first thing that we did look at is what are the needs and the requirements of the city, and that's actually developed by outside the city. It's done by the state housing community development department. You can change the slide. Mandates each jurisdiction plan their share of community housing needs. So how do they know what the share is? The share is developed by a projection driven through the state housing element law and the Monterey Bay Association of Governments and the Monterey Bay Area Association of Governments. And the state hands that down, we go to the next slide, and then the MBank will basically distribute that among the different jurisdictions based upon population, etc. So there's a process of how that happens. It took all of 2022, if not longer, and by the end of 22, we had the 6th cycle housing element amount. We've got a requirement under what's called the regional housing housing needs assessment. Go ahead. Next one's good. Thanks, Karen. So the reason the regional housing needs allocation, excuse me, is bifurcated by different cities within our area. Amway, that most people know, includes Santa Cruz and Monterey County. Once they bifurcate that, the cities may or may not accept that, but that sort of comes down to what is it the city needs, what are the housing needs that's been allocated under the regional house, under the RHNA. And then next slide. The nice part is when you do housing element, there are some benefits to it. You can seek funds. The state will sue you if you have a compliant housing element. There's a few things that you do want to do, but overall, it's a little too far. Sorry. That's overall the each jurisdiction is required to do their fair share of regional housing needs. It's based on state population growth, mix of economic segment, affordability, mix of zoning and density. It's a planning target, important, not the building quota. So what is our overall population? Well, the city of Delray Oaks has not had a population growth over the last 20 years or longer. Looking back at 2010, 2000, they're almost at a stagnant population, and it's actually the highest peak was in 2017, and it's actually gone down even 2020 with the first analysis. So you'll see that in the 6 cycles that there's actually been a reduction in the population of the city. It's just really doesn't grow, and it's much slower rate than the region and the city. The household size, it changes periodically over time, but there's a decrease in size over the years as well. Next slide. And we have an aging population, so this helps the city to understand what do you want to plan for in your housing element and in your general planning. How would you want to make sure you're taking care of your disparate age groups? We also have a high level of female heads of household. Comparatively, at least it's changed and gone up. And so the city housing element recognizes these special needs. And there's also about over a 10% population that could have a small population that could be considered to have some sort of disability. So those are the special needs that we consider as we develop programs and policies for the housing element. Can't read what that says, but I think it's pretty consistent with what I just said. My printout was a little small. So on this slide, it's also talking about what we need to discuss in the housing element, which is really what is the city data and how has it changed over the years. And this slide actually discusses the makeup of ethnicity in the city. And we have had a change in ethnicity. Majority of people within the city of Delray Oaks, I think it was over 80%, were considered white Caucasian. That's changed over the course of the last 10 years, where we've increased the Hispanic population, reduced the white ethnicity, and increased somewhat on that Asian population. So we're, although overall the population in Delray Oaks, comparatively to the rest of neighboring jurisdictions, like Seaside and Marina and South County, it has a higher level of just pure Caucasian population than the rest, and less diversity of others. Okay. Next slide. So the state's mandate, for housing allocation basically means how many numbers did we get? If you want to look at a comparison, in the 5th cycle, we had 27 total RHNA numbers. That would be 11 and 5 of moderate and above moderate, and then the rest associated with low and very low. Now we are looking at 184 total numbers of need within the housing element, of which 98 are considered low, very low. That's an unmet need. That's how it's described, and the rest is associated from moderate and above moderate. So that's where our job is trying to plan where could these housing units go. Next slide. And we do that through looking at the types of housing that we need to provide. Next slide, and looking at trying to provide that within specific income categories. So the RHNA numbers that we're looking at are really based on, when I say very low and low, that's a percentage of affordability associated with the types of income categories. So the income categories for Delray Oaks are identified on the next slide. I can't read that, but it's updated from 2022, and I think it's median income is now 86. We're very close. 81.6, and it's gone up a bit in the last year, and that changes on an annual basis. So that's how they look at how many units you need. They look at which income categories that you have, and they look at what these income categories are and how it changes over the years. And that's done by the state. Again, thank you. So our 184 of the 98 units of affordable is it 3 or 4 times the last planning cycle? It's quite large, but it's also only a small comparison of what's required under the RHNA for Monterey County as a whole, which is over 20,000. Next slide. So once we see what we got in terms of the number of units to plan for and areas, we have to look at where are their sites within Delray Oaks. And I think everyone knows the city so well that everyone understands that it's it's a tough call. The state requirements say they have to be adequate sites, they have to be a certain size, they have to have certain services or planned services, and they have to also affirmatively further fair housing. So there's every year and a lot of new laws and a lot of new requirements for site requirements and everything related to the housing element. And the city is moving forward to comply with all the other jurisdictions, Monterey County and the state. Next slide. So the sites inventory, as we look at where is their available land, what we look at specific properties, we do a parcel by parcel analysis. We're looking at, is there available infrastructure? Is there any land that's owned residential at all within the city that isn't already built? We look at suitability, potential development capacity, because we have to prove that there's a realistic capacity to HCD to be able to use this site for future. And next slide, which you can see and you look at the mapping, the boundaries along being right next to the airport, being a linear city with very much built out, mostly single family homes, already having a great benefit of having a lot of dedicated parkland. And having also the Canyon Del Creek and other constraints within the city, including different FEMA flooding, etc. It's a tough call to be able to find available land. The other go ahead, next one. So the last we looked at residential land to accommodate regional housing needs, and most of the residential land is already built out. There is no residential land zoned right now in the corridor. It's zoned commercial, which there's some allowance for certain amount of under your C1, you're allowed to have single family and development on your C1, but you really don't have the amount of land or amount of density available or any residential land available at this point for creating 184 units of housing We looked at other sites. I think it's important to understand that this is the fifth cycle. We spent a lot of time before the city council planning commission a number of times to confirm what sites would be used for fifth cycle. And the fifth cycle, we looked at what was called the 17-acre site, which was subject to the RFP. It's on the other side of Canyon Del Rey, near the Parks District Rocktown. That's very much limited and has a lot of environmental constraints and wetlands, and it's also being considered extension of the park. So that was taken out of the fifth cycle land use inventory. We also looked at the landscape use of the other side, and there on the side of the church Safeway with the Del Rey Farms, is I think the name of it. And unfortunately, that also that's part of the floodplain, potential wetlands, near the creek, forte pathway going through it, and so it has limitations and directed to take that out as well from the fifth cycle. And so those two are not available for sixth cycle either. For this, we looked in the fifth cycle at trying to use as much ADUs, accessory dwelling units, as possible within the city. You can go to the next one. And basically, the HCD said, you know, you have no history of having ADUs in the city. You're going to be able to say 100 ADUs in the next 10 years for the next cycle, then you have to prove that you were able to do that in the past. So that doesn't work. So we went back to the sites inventory for city cycle, and we are stretching, looking at other areas. We looked at the area on the other side of the Moose Lodge toward Tarpey's. We talked to the Airport Land Use Commission, looked at the safety zone maps, things like that, and we have limitations there because of the safety zones. There's a portion of the Moose Lodge lot, a 1.7 acre lot, that's outside, or most of it is outside. It's actually zoned, for its own single family, also, so that's potential, but the property owner isn't interested, and doesn't really help. So we're going to move forward talking to the different property owners. The area that's considered light industrial also has some limitations for the airport, such as the safety zones, but maybe in the future that may change. So it's a consideration. Whenever we were speaking about where should there be housing, what would you like to see? Invariably, you get mixed use, some type of mixed use. How can we use the area, that particular light industrial area? So it's something that we definitely try to explore outside of the realms of the airport. So this is just an example of the sites inventory. Just go back, it's just a quick chart. Each of the sites have, a myriad of requirements of what we have to put onto the site, which is what we've done here. And that's part of the new appendix C for cycle 6. That's we're in the midst of completing and preparing next time. And you just look at the aerial and you can see the available land pretty much located that's vacant. Is the public corridor. Next slide. And it's also just an explanation of these different locations of single family, and in yellow, so you can see the development that's already occurred in the city, the constraints that housing availability for vacant sites, okay. Airport land use safety zones, I'll explain that in the document as well. Okay. So in the fifth cycle, we were directed basically by the letter from HCD to use sites, what we call sites 1 and 1A. That is the airport. That's the location of the airport. That is owned by the city. That's 232 acres. We did not consider sites what we call 2, 3, and 4, which are the two sites I just identified, and then maybe called site 4. So what did we do in sixth cycle? We looked at additional sites. Other sites that weren't under city ownership, sites within previous housing elements, this is kind of a question, where do you think we should go? Are there any areas outside the airport restriction zone or within the city we haven't talked about or thought about? Privately owned lands that we should be over half of an acre, that's what HDB thinks it's a reasonable amount of touching with housing on. So, you know, that's an open question for anyone, time for your speaking. This actually shows the location of the former corridor in the blue of sites 1 and 1A. And it's just an example of our sites inventory. So we also looked at the sites that weren't owned by the city in the former corridor. That's something to think about and explore and get your thoughts on today. So there are 2 sites and Troy, I wonder if maybe you could point to the sites that are owned by Frangax. There's 20 acres there that's on the east side, and then that's right, I forgot there's a point to. And then about 56 acres on the other side, on the eastern side of the border property all the way down. That's right there. And that's the site of the initiative that was approved for an RV park. So that actually has an entitlement for 50 acre feet of water, 210 RV parks, that type of visitor serving uses that they are able to develop under the requirements that they have, the series of mitigations they have to comply with. And so that is an opportunity side, everything to think about in terms of perhaps approaching that property owner to see whether they'd be interested in putting some of those sites aside for a tiny lot or any other kind of an approach to be able to use some of those sites for affordable housing. The RV sites are actually about 5,000 square feet. So that's what I think. Yeah, and with the new types of models like that, you know, you could maybe focus that on senior housing, or it's also the creation of a community there. So that's an opportunity side I think is important to consider, and we've looked at different models and things like that could be good. And the approach that we have to take, obviously, anything in the formal border still needs to have the residential zone. So to allow that type of use with the proposing the overlay zone, cycle, which would be extended to 6 cycle. The other site is the 20-acre site that's located on south on General Jim Boulevard, and it's also owned by the same property owners, and they also have a water entitlement when they purchase the property. It's also closer to the infrastructure that's already there. There's water and non-potable water along General Jim Moore from Ridgecliff Water District lines already created there. I think that site would be appropriate for the mixed use type of development that the city's always talked about. For affordable housing, again, we have to approach the developer to see if they are property owners, see if they would be interested. And also there's always something. So it's the former corridor is the former military base that's been claimed for the uses associated with the general plan that the cities are adopted, which are commercial, neighborhood commercial, and visitor serving. We would have to go through DTSC. There's a covenant on parts of the site to be able to lift a covenant against residential use there. And so we require further cleanup on either or the lifting the site based upon the type of development. And there's development that's grading and things like that. So that is something that we are looking into further, but it is actually something that the DTSC has expressed that they're interested in being able to move forward. That's the same situation that is facing all of the world. Except for the residential area. Okay, so next slide. And again, this is just, I think this is site K1, or line K1, which is the site on the general gym. Which is an idea that we have to put together for the housing element. Next slide. And so that takes us to housing element policies and programs, which is really an important element of the housing element. We must include how are you addressing fair housing issues, inventory of sites, and also policies and strategies to meet the community's housing needs. And next slide. Another element that's new for sixth cycle is the AB 686, affirmatively furthering fair housing. It's a deep analysis of what the city is made of, all the different areas that really are addressing fair housing, and different strategies to make sure that there's no impedance to development of fair housing for all communities, all income levels, and all ethnic groups within the city. Next slide. So we would like to maybe spend a little time on some of the policies and programs today that may be considered for amending within the city. The benefit of just having gone through the fifth cycle housing amendment is that we can identify those areas that, and also reviewing a number of different letters that HD has written on other housing elements, identify those areas where expanding or improving or amending housing elements program may be appropriate. So this is a descriptor of your existing housing element, and in programs and policies, there's an overview of overall policies and goals first, policies next, and program implementation. And the policies and programs are, the implementation is the meat of it, but the goals and policies are hard to argue with. They are create affordable housing, affirmatively make sure there's housing for all, income groups, and already you have programs and policies in your housing element to ensure that equitable housing that you try having for all income levels and all people. So I think you have a good set of policies. We looked at those and are listening to the last one, so we have one or two amendments, but I think the focus really is on programs. So next slide. The rest of your policies. What we call chapter 7. Go ahead. So before we go into really talking about, perhaps some areas for amending, I just wanted to identify, this is just one of many, housing element workshops. We've had workshops over the last year, but we've also started on March 16th, talked about 5th and 6th cycle at a joint workshop, planning commission and council. We March 28th, they got the go ahead, the official contract, we started on the 6th cycle, and also there was other questions about schedule, things like that. And we had the May 3rd workshop via Zoom, and then we got today's. So we have an opportunity tomorrow to meet with the planning commission, and there's an item on the agenda. Whether or not we need that, at least we have that item with it. So there's this is just a start. What we're doing now is putting together something that's planned, and that plan is going to be on the city's website for 30 days. And we're trying to not just get comments now, but any comments that the public has during that 30-day review period of the draft 6th cycle housing element. We take that in, we consider those and make the changes, and we have 10 days to do that. 5 days, 2 weeks essentially, and then that gets submitted to HCD. So there's another opportunity for public comment, and then HCD comes and provides the comment back to us. So they have 90 days. So the real goal here is to try and get something to HCD to start out to the public first, consider the comments for the 30 days, and then have to HCD to start their 90-day. And it's really critical because we want to be able to meet the deadline at the end of the year to adopt the state side housing report for the city's potential for funding for any further. So here I can actually stop if anyone has any questions because or comments on the site's inventory, or I can go forward and talk about some of the programs that we have reviewed and looked at for possible amendment or consideration for a new policy and programs. It's up to the council planning.
Yeah, so anyone from the public or planning commission as well as the council have any questions, just raise your hand and then you can call on.
Right, and thank you very much. Yeah. And in particular, I'm looking for, if you have any comments on where would you like to see the city grow, the sites that you've heard about thus far. And if you're more comfortable with me going through the rest of the presentation, talking about the program, which are about that right slide, I think. But
Thanks, Denise. I have a question about when we look at land that the city does not own, so it's privately owned, like the Graniacs. Do we have to show HCD that that landowner is willing to potentially build? How do we convince HCD that that's a?
typically what other jurisdictions have done is they've sent letters or they've contacted them directly, and then the property owner would say, yes, I'm interested, and then that moves forward. They say, no, they're not interested, and HCD wouldn't really want to go forward. So we showed them through, either communication or just the knowledge that, documentation.
Why would they benefit having affordable housing on their land?
I can answer that for them, but,
Have we had any conversations with the Graniacs?
we have reached out to cleaners on both properties, K1 and K2. And we haven't officially said anything yet, so there's nothing that I can report. But I feel like it's an opportunity for anyone to be able to provide housing in a jurisdiction.
No, regardless, you're talking about the suitability and getting the ordinance clear. Do we know how many acres of our sites right now are already? And I guess, is that an impediment? I mean, do we just zone it in the?
Yes, we have mapping and information from both the Army, the clearance from the Army, all that backend information, and then there's a large area. Considering the amount of housing that's under the RENA, if it's 6, maybe 300 units, there's over at least over 100 acres.
So, yeah. So when we rezone it, do we have to rezone just that part of it, or we just
You
rezone the
can
whole
do
thing?
zoning overlay of the entirety of
You
the
just put a
site.
caveat in there?
Exactly. I think the flexibility is something that we're looking at in terms of the zoning overlay, and then inside the requirements, it would be the requirement would have to be full and okay for.
Okay.
You don't want to have to do multiple zoning overlays.
Yeah, that's why you can put a caveat. In kind of following Councilman's comments there, you look at these other properties. Can ACB force us to go with properties if we don't have the land to build? I mean,
No.
okay, that's what I thought, but we were like, okay, they're gonna make us go buy land. Okay,
Never heard of that before.
all right, okay, thanks.
Okay, well, I'll move forward a little bit with the housing program. And part of the analysis that's done in preparation of any housing element is really an assessment of what has the city done in the last period cycle in terms of moving programs forward, and then what new laws or things that have come into play that you want to make changes on. So the first program that we're looking at for amending is obviously A1, which is identification of which sites and where we would be able to meet the RENA. So this program is basically saying, as it did in cycle 5, amend the zoning ordinance or identify using sites 1A and whatever sites you choose for meeting arena. And so this is a program that we will be amending and updating. Since HCD had quite a bit of specific language they wanted us to put in for fifth cycle, we'll probably use that same language. But I think we have enough information, even if we only had sites 1 and 1A, which again are owned by the city, we would be able to meet the arena with that. So we will further the discussion on the other 2 sites, assuming that that is not contrary to the property owner or the city's consideration. The other thing we're going to add is more information about ADUs. As I said before, we will basically need to approve that now that we have an adopted ADU ordinance and we have some history of having ADUs built and permitted in the city, we have some opportunity to be able to say yes. In the following, 8 years, there may be a possibility for 8 to 10 ADUs, given the history. We also will be identifying, which I think is for all the basic incentives for ADUs and that's a change. So these are actually 2 new programs not associated with ADU. This is a mixed use zoning designation. As I talked about earlier, the number of times I've come before the city, there's always been a discussion of, well, we would like to have mixed use zoning designation in the 404 or possibly even in an area that would not be subject to the airport safety zone. Should land become available or water become available. So this is sort of it. And it's a potential to develop a mixed use zoning designation or an overlay designation or something to be able to promote that for the city if they're interested. If you do affordable housing, the mixed use requirement is to have at least 50% on non-vacant sites have to be affordable. Is that that's a check. And then the interesting thing about this that I wanted to put these back in is because the planning commission had these specific exact programs in the housing element when they adopted it in October, November. They recommended it October 2019. So after all that went through, I thought it would be appropriate to put these back in. They were taken out in an attempt by the city at that time not to, because it involved a zoning code amendment, not to get sued. So I thought that would be appropriate to at least take a look at these. And so they're included here. There was also a small lot residential, tiny home, tiny lot program. It's new program A3. I should say it's not really new. There's another one that the planning commission and had as the and recommending to the city council. So it would be sort of I think there's a lot more information now about this type of neighborhood design, small home type homes, not necessarily tiny lots, but anymore. So those are 2 programs we're recommending and we can put into the draft and as like people identify if they consider them not, or if you have any opinions on them tonight, we'd like to hear them. The next one is an updated program C2, and that's just about the accessory dwelling units, ADUs. The only change on that is really because HCD requires us to be a little more specific about here's how you're going to monitor this, you're going to do an annual report on this, and so to show that we can, use these as credit towards your arena. Next slide. And then this is the program that we had before, just amending. It's a program to support and reduce homelessness that's already in the housing element. And we amended it because the emergency shelter ordinance was adopted. And so this is just encouraging the city support of this, very similar to the last program that Jeremy had, and also to report in, on a regular basis about that. And then there's a law regarding municipal compliance, developing a written process, and we just amended that to be a little more specific about where housing is permitted. It was taken out of, again, it was just a sentence that was taken out of the last time. Next slide. This is a new program completely. It's something that I've seen in other housing elements, and that is just doing what we normally do, which is really providing an annual report on housing, meeting RENA to the city on an annual basis and seeing what progress has been made on moving forward on housing element programs. I think it's really important that we kind of focus on that in the future, given the light that shined on housing elements, so that we can say that we're and can be making progress toward some of these housing element programs and identify the ones that aren't maybe possibly too difficult to do, or we don't have the city staff or will manpower. So that's P4, a new program, an annual reporting. It'll be similar to the annual partnership reports that are done and provided to the city, the public hearing of the planning commission before April 1st, and then to the city council. And then a new program basically to do all the things that we want to talk about in terms of affirmatively furthering fair housing by providing equal housing opportunities for all existing and future residents, it says paradise residents, so take that. So this is really different strategies after we've done the analysis on AFFH. If there are any impediments to mobility, to moving people up, to staying in place, protecting existing residents from displacement. We want to just really focus on any of these impediments that may move our citizenry out of the area as opposed to staying there, particularly the senior population. We talked about that quite a bit on the third workshop. What can be done to keep people in place so they do not have to be moved. They don't move out because they're displaced because of cost or other factors. And that brings us to the next program. Oops. Oh, there's one more, but it is basically, adopt a universal design element ordinance, and this was brought up on the May 3rd meeting. And if you adopt a universal design ordinance, you're governing the construction and modification of homes using design principles that can help people to remain in their home because it helps their physical needs, things like that. It kind of reduces the amount of, or those that might be moved up or out because they can't stay in their home. So that was one that we thought that was well endorsed by the last meeting on May 3rd, and so we have next. I think the last one. So I just wanted to remind everyone that I think it was on March 16th or March 28th, we provided the full list of the city programs and on both of those dates, and take a look at these because you'll be asked again to take a look at them. We've looked at them quite a bit, and just like your general plan, you have a lot of really good programs and policies that are already in place related to providing housing, all economic settings of the community, firmly furthering fair housing. So you're the gist of the goals of the policies and events. So these are some that we've come up with to present to you and to the public during the public review period to be able to say, let's try to go more. The reality is that HCD will have a lot more comments than probably anyone here, and we'll offer probably more. But I think again, the idea is to see what we can do early on to get to move this forward toward HCD, keeping it with their goal of getting it to them after the public review period. Things. So I had if anyone had any questions on the schedule, I'll take that at the end, but we are moving forward on the timeline for completion. And I really again want to have some listening sessions today before we get into that, if there's any comments. So we can do, there's no more, that's just extra stuff.
Before you switch the slide, can I have a couple of questions?
Sure.
We, few of us went to a planning commission training seminar in April. And it kind of scared us a little bit into, first of all, understanding that there was 1,200 new bits of legislation that been put into law in the state, all based on housing. And the state is really pushing housing to a huge degree. This is what we're hearing. you probably already know all this. Some of the things that they were saying is that last year, 500,000 people moved out of California. So California is looking for more population, for more income. One of the things that they told us has been pushed to the top is a term that they use, which is right to buy. Is that the correct term? Where a developer can come in, if we're not doing anything with these properties, if we don't have if we haven't broken ground, that's a developer can come in and basically buy the property from us and develop it. And we have very little say on it. And the question that I have on that is if they were to come in, if some entity were to come in and say, we're gonna build this. We basically have very little ability to stop them. Is that correct?
Why don't you go with the full question?
Okay, yeah, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, it's just trying to formulate this. But I guess the biggest question is, if we have these requirements, like right now, 184 units, 98 of which are affordable or lower income, would that entity have to adhere, and can we tell them that where they can develop in the sense of the property, and what has to be open space and what has to be parks and recreation? Basically, what control do we have when we lose it all? I know one of the things that they mentioned is that we've created basically, what's we're looking for? Like here we have zoning, we have all of how high you can build, how, the square footage on the lot, that if we have a different setup for 1 and 1A, and yet what we have here at Del Rio proper is more desirable to the developer, they can push that aside and go with what we currently have. There's something currently have here in Del Rio proper. So basically, we lose control on that as well. Am I correct in what I'm hearing, or is it something new to you?
Well, there's a lot of questions in that question.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. As well.
Right, yeah, and I think that the laws are set up so that there is more government coming in and saying, yes, if you don't develop housing, or if you don't not comply with the housing element, here's what we can do. I think it depends on the jurisdiction, the site, the specificity, does the site have to be subdivided or not? And it's really more of a question that for Alex and John, and that can be answered for tonight. So we can certainly provide that from a planning staff standpoint. But if you could put that in context to how that could help us with.
I'm not sure. Fast forward everything.
But I think what, the concern that I'm hearing on the global thing is, from California, of course, but also from the city, is that what do we lose if we don't do this? Or what rights do we not have? Can someone come in and take this, the cities have surplus land act requests already out. The cities have this, some sites for some time. And in terms of the specificity of your questions in relation to that, I'm just going to defer to Alex to come back at a different time. I'm sure it's not tonight to try and, delve through the laws.
Right, and I guess what I'm getting at is it's important for us to move forward as quickly as we can, which you know better than any of us.
I hear you, and that's a great dialogue to the question. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
About the schedule, just in general.
Actually, yeah, the schedule, I think I'd really like to hear if you could put the other one back before that. I'd really like to hear it first before we go into the details, because you've seen the schedule before, it hasn't changed, and it's on course. I'd like to hear if there's any input on really anything that we talked about tonight, that you were presented with ideas about different programs, you were presented with ideas about different sites. Are there things that don't resonate, or are there things that resonate? is there a policy or a program that you want to be able to, that you've heard from another jurisdiction that you want to be able to include? Anything that, again, we want to be able to say we've got, well, we do have great participation, but we've got a lot of, always great participation from city council and planning commission and our citizen base. We want to be able to say, if anyone's put forth an idea, we've considered it and how we considered it. It's another law. One of the later laws in the common element to ensure that we consider comment and then say how, what we address it. So I think we've gotten great input already from our last March meetings and our May meeting. And so we're just here to provide any other background or listen to any comments or that you may have.
So Denise, the property that's owned by, not owned by the city that's out there, that's zone commercial.
Yes, everything in the border is zone commercial. They also have, they changed the zoning ordinance to also allow RVs as an allowed use. And that commercial.
And RDs wouldn't address the unit number.
Well, it's interesting. I think that's a really good question to see because, if you're talking about full-time versus visitor serving type of thing, but it is, it could be the same model, honestly, that sort of size. And they have 210 spaces on all of their 3 phases, plus a community area. And they've got maps for it, and they've done the initiative at specific mitigation requirements. And so I think it's worth exploring as to whether or not a portion of that would be used for year round, could be used for year round. And then maybe benefit because if it's, not necessarily graded in, it might be a bit of a difference in terms of ETNC.
It seemed to me it was years ago when they came to us to get that, and it seemed like it was, transient sort of RV use.
At that time, that was
Racetrack.
the plan,
Mhm.
So they would have to agree, as the question that was raised before, they would have to agree that they'd be interested in a different combination.
So we would have to rezone even if they decided they were going to do something residential.
I haven't looked into that much, but I'm assuming that we're, something in terms of an overlay that we talked about. City attorney about, that would provide for affordable.
So I just want to follow up, you were talking about the ADUs and people are using waivers and different, they're kind of encouraging that, I guess, was the implication there that obviously ADUs on that's our big number, but do we get like brownie points and show effort? Is that kind of what you're gonna do through ADUs to show them that you're trying? Is that kind of what you were implying or?
So the program that we put up was the existing program with some minor changes. The implication was that, well, no, we wouldn't be able to use ADUs to comply with the numbers of RETA, but we could perhaps, maybe there's 8 to 10 ADUs that we can use to reduce our RETA now. The point I was trying to make in terms of HCD is that they will be very specific. You have to have a history of that there is, available that we've actually had.
Oh, okay, so you can't, we're gonna build 30 ADUs, you go, okay, well, you built one in the last 10 years.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it.
And then the program was, if you're gonna use ADUs at all, it was, okay, you have to show that you're monitoring them, that you have some incentives, and that you're really trying to promote ADUs. And so those are the 3 points.
Okay.
So what kind of teeth does the state have if we don't meet this RETA number?
Ask Huntington Beach.
I was just gonna say that. Soon.
They're going.
So it's about, again, it's not building the house, it's providing the location of the space.
Like, that was rhetorical.
Oh.
You didn't say it.
Imagine if you apply for a grant and you haven't done that, you go, yeah, sorry.
I bet that addresses bring the number by building.
Yeah.
I hear you. But there are benefits to, having them find out.
What kind of money are you talking about? You mentioned a couple times, having the housing on the update on time and all that is the rights for getting state money. We're talking serious money or is it just sort of like targeted? Little
I
bits of
know,
money?
I think at one point, REIT 2.0 was going to be from baseline if you had a compliant common element. CDBG, I think, but also, we didn't have common element. I don't have all the specifics on that in terms of the funding.
I didn't mean that, I just wondered if it was like big money or it's like, oh, there's, $20,000 for some planning or something,
I know that there's two parts to read the 2.0. One of them is it's a competitive grant and it's, if you were to use it to provide and show that you can get housing, actually get housing built or establish some sort of impediment or take away an impediment. It's not quite clear that it haven't finalized all the criteria. It's much larger, yeah, and the 2.0 that they're just handing out to the city, I think is 180 or 80,000 or something. But maybe that's.
I'm not on NREG anymore, it's.
It's in my head. I think there was a question.
Yeah, so if we move forward, we're talking about doing the overlays on the forward property stuff, and assuming at some point a developer were to come in and make a proposal to start developing that land out there, and assuming that it would be cost effective for the city to proceed with that process, is the, we have the ultra low, all three layers of the low income housing, is that all inclusionary? And is it proportional? So if they come in and say they're gonna build 100 homes, they have to build a percentage of each through the process, like, so they come to us to get building permits and they only want to build mansions. Do we have to say, wait a minute, you can build 5 mansions, but you have to build 10 of these and 8 of these, 9 of those? Is that all gonna be in this housing element, or is that something the state will enforce?
So in the housing element and in the last one, there is a program to develop an inclusionary housing. That's, we're thinking that in terms of specificity, in terms of specifically toward the former corridor. I think the requirement, it used to be is 20% minimum in the former corridor. So I think it could be part of the development agreement or it could be included in housing ordinance, but that's part of the negotiation with the developer. But certainly, yeah, the city owns the property. So the city has the right to mandate a certain percentage of inclusionary housing.
Yeah, the last thing I want to see is the inclusionary housing shut over in the corners. And go, here, you guys can have this over here, we don't want any, we'll come over on this side of town.
Yes. and I
It needs
think-
to be infill and mixed.
And I think we probably should look back and make sure we capture that, because that was a comment that was also made a month or so ago. And I want to make sure, I think I covered it. It's definitely part of the affirmative fair housing, and it's definitely part of the goals and policies. The community wants to have community that mirrors everybody, that isn't, putting X number of homes.
We don't want to
Yeah.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
I had a similar question to Bill's, and that was on the affordability. So you were saying mixed use, we would need 50% of that to be affordable. Is that what you said?
So.
And what is the definition of affordable? I mean, over the last year, that's changed.
So we go back to the
significantly.
AMI slide. There are two parts to your question. What I was saying was related to if you're going to be building mixed use housing and you want to get credit on, I think, a non-vacant site, you have, in other words, if you're going to do commercial, and you have to do 51% residential.
Oh, now,
That's what I meant. That was related at all to the affordability question.
But then the
question is related to the arena provides a specific number of here's the amount of very low, moderate, and above moderate units that you need to meet your arena, and they've given us that number already. It's in the arena, and it is as I said, I think it's like 38 and 60 for low and very low, and then the remainder is moderate and above moderate.
and
So
then
they
that-
provide that, and then that's based upon the median income. Area median income for Monterey County changes every year. It's provided by HUD and HCD, and that's how they determine. It's not.
So it's just based on the income and not on really the affordability of the existing, of the housing that we're talking about.
Well, I think what they're thinking is that if you make this much money, you can afford this type of a house, and so that's how they projected it, and that's a huge formula, you can look on the website there, that's identified, and this will be posted on the website. HCD and there's a lot of background information on how they get to that number.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other questions around here, or thoughts?
Giving for this presentation and also for facilitating this. You mentioned something about the issue of gentrification. And what specific programs or policies that we can really like implement in order to mitigate this issue? Thank you.
Thank you, that's a good question too. We have an aging population in the city, and so if you have a lot of people who've lived here a long time, and they're aging in place. So, I'm not sure it's as much gentrification, people are moving in, but it's just who the makeup is now. Part of that is also we have an aging senior need, so, some of the policies are related to trying to, design ideas to age in place, things like that. Other policies or programs to address diversity and things like that. I'm really open to those. Some of the things are, that the other housing elements have looked at include just things like, trying to, take out parking regulations. I think in one of the first meetings I came here with a little list of what would be considered a detriment to urban fair housing. Some of that, but some of them, includes, so what are we doing that is, that would not be promoting diversity? One of the things is having a definition of family that is not the universal one that the city, so the city's done something about that. They've changed their definition of family to meet the state. So are there any other things like that that could be lifted off of a zoning ordinance, or how the city deals with applications, or how the city, embraces ideas for housing? Other than that, I'm open to any suggestions. So we'll look into that.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. And also as well, probably residents, because we just don't want them to be displaced, like existing residents right now who are in the low income. And then of course, when we have new homes that will be built, of course, there's a gentrification usually that happens, and these people would be displaced, and how we can be like integrated of the city, that would be nice.
Absolutely, and one of the things is, as are people being, keeping are they being priced out of their homes? Or, one of the programs talks about also rehab of homes. So there could be, neighborhood programs to help neighbors, without necessarily making it a big formal thing, but something that, as a small community, the city's actually able to do. Are there any buildings that need, are in need of that, or surroundings that are in need of help? I think just the Christmas giveaway or the checks and things that were done during COVID, just describe the kind of community that wants to help others and want people to stay here. So it's hard to put that into it.
What you just said just reminded me of something in terms of helping the elderly stay in their homes and additional needs. I know that Meals on Wheels is looking at a new program to help the elderly to be able to stay in their homes, whether it's just coming in and helping to build a ramp or coming in and helping with whatever it is. And it's a pilot project that they want to get off the ground. So it might be something that Delray Oaks might want to partner with to do that. And it's, of course, Meals on Wheels is all voluntary. So it could be something that the community could, volunteer with and help to get that off the ground in this area.
That's a really great thing, and they can translate to a program of, research or trying to partner with local nonprofits to try to help our efforts.
So kind of on that note, many years ago now. I used to work with it was called Christmas in April and then it moved to. Can't remember the name of the new outfit, but they would go in once a year and they would help people, underserved people or people of limited means remodel their houses. Put new windows in, remodel kitchens. We actually did a house in Salinas that was sinking. The whole under of the house had rotted completely. We jacked it up, redid that. Rebuilding together as the program is. What I think might help, and I don't know how you would incorporate it in the housing element, or if it would just be something we should do as a city in itself, would be look at some kind of a clearinghouse of all of the available tools for keeping the elderly, the under, people that don't have enough money to stay, so we're not displacing these people. A lot of them don't have a clue what's available out there. I don't think probably 20 people in or 5 people in this room knew what Rebuilding Together or Christmas in April was. It was a huge program. It was a spinoff of the housing, I don't remember as much, but the one that Jimmy Carter was with.
Habitat.
Yeah, Habitat for Humanity. It was a spinoff of that. Instead of being a year-long project, it was one day built. And we had a day to go in and do that. I mean, it was amazing, just putting up a fence in somebody's house, fixing a roof, putting some windows in. How much that improved their quality of life and their pride of ownership in the property. Once you get to a certain point that you can't take care of your property, you lose pride in it, and you get, it's just a downward spiral. You have nothing else, just a clearinghouse of all the programs that, the city, county, and state level. It's just a place you could go on the website and click and go, look, here's all these things. That might be something that we can include as a program. That would be very beneficial for anybody.
The linkage to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you.
That's a good idea. Thank you. Is there anyone else that has a comment or question?
I don't know, it's not really so much the housing, but probably more for city management. In reading through here, one thing I kind of got my attention was the site inventory. We haven't had the developers down there for at least a couple of years now. It's been a long time since they talked to us and they don't have no idea what's going on, but it said in there they had gotten a tentative parcel map approved by the city. And I was just kind of curious what that was. I don't think we've seen anything at the city council or I don't remember anything. I mean, the planning commission, I don't remember anything at the city council, but who approved a parcel map? I mean, I'm just curious, at some point, it might be nice to kind of understand where we're at with all that and,
Sure. I think that the parcel map that we have has at the time that the Grand X and some partners purchased the property from the city, there was a survey done and that mapping to create the different parcels that you saw on the map before. So that's
so it was just the big outline now. So it wasn't, I'm thinking parcel, I'm thinking like what you have.
subdivision.
Yeah, like when you see if there's money, you want it, and really you see all
A partial map is, or even the subdivision by ourselves is just creating a partial out of the large area. So
Okay.
out of the 360, whatever acres are there, were.
Oh, okay. This is one A, this, okay, all right, I was just curious, as I like, oh. Didn't see that, all right, I got you.
Denise, I was just looking back at one of our previous workshops, and it was brought up about square foot, doing permit fees for based on square footage as opposed to units. Would that be a program?
That's a great idea.
So doing,
So, yeah, based on permit fees on square footage as opposed to the unit. So in other words, if something was smaller, right, they would have a smaller permit fee, and so it would incentivize people to build things that may be more affordable than a huge house.
right, I think, I hear what you're saying, the incentives to the developer to the affordable housing.
Yeah.
And capture that. in the program.
Yeah, I also have development impact fees program and density bonus program, but
We do have a program that talks about a state density bonus. Right now, we've never had the opportunity to any developer come in and request one. We follow state density law, density bonus law, which changes rapidly all the time. And, you know, it may be, we, you know, in the programs and the timeline of implementation, there's a priority from the fifth and continue to the sixth for the developer. As the bonus ordinance. Anyone else? Sit down. Thank you very much for your time. Did you want to talk about something?
Just one more question. The peak review,
Right,
when does that start and are we reviewing, because like this meeting, I didn't know how to.
well, you're
And
just.
so I went through the fifth cycle housing update, I went through all the programs, I went through everything. So, so where can my homework be put to, like, when I have edits or thoughts, can I email those to you?
Absolutely.
And then, okay. And then, so the 30-day, will that be a 6th cycle? How's, so this won't, it won't be what's currently on the web.
What's currently on the web is the fifth cycle, which is before the HCD for their review of this.
Okay, so that's already in to
Yeah.
HCD, so we're just waiting,
Mhm.
okay.
That, and then, there's also the notice of preparation for the EIR for the fifth cycle.
Right.
EIR. So if you have any comments on that, then please write them, send them to the city. So where we are right now is on the sixth cycle, which is the end point of this year, 2023. And so, if you want, I mean, the schedule, you can't really read it, but the requirements are, for my scope, I submit it to the city first, and city manager takes a review of the document, which we are working on previously. Then it goes to the, it goes posts on the web. So there's, and at that point, 30 days to review the document for the public and provide written comments.
And that's the 6th cycle draft.
That's a sixth
Okay.
cycle. Mhm.
Is it gonna be essentially what the 5th cycle?
It's different in some ways. I mean, all of, I'm going to go over, the introduction is updated that and provides more information about public participation and how to address AFFH. Chapter 2 is completely updated, for 2022 6 cycle numbers and considers also the recent laws. Chapter 3 is the sites inventory. That sites inventory is, changed because we're looking at additional sites. So I think what we heard today is continue to look at public word orders, and we're going to reach out to the property owners that are not the city and see that. So that's the change there. Chapter 4 is a governmental, non-governmental and non-governmental constraints on housing, and that's been updated quite a bit in terms of just recent, the changes since last time. In terms of what's new, which is water, hazmat, things like that, just identifying those constraints, but it's pretty much an overview, in those 30 pages or something, it's all of the governmental constraints, including this zoning standards and things like that, parking standards. That's considered a governmental constraint. The non-governmental, which is what would be a parking, Chapter 5 is assessment of accomplishments from the last housing cycle. That's already completed and done in E1 and E2 in this cycle, so we updated that. And then chapter 6 is energy conservation. We did some update to that information. Chapter 7 is the meat of it, is the programs and policies, and that's really the focus, and that's where we're going to want to focus. So take a look at that. That essentially is what we'll be looking at when you consider, adoption. The Planning Commission will give you a recommendation, and the City Council will consider adoption. The other changes are on the appendices. There's about 40 or 50 pages we've written on affirmatively furthering fair housing, and that's a big chunk of what needs to be done. And right now, we're working on the analysis of that. So what did we learn? And, what did we hear? And what can we do to, to make it better, essentially, in terms of providing for all economic segments of the community. Our other appendices are outreach. And so we have to provide a lot more information about, comments that were made and how those were addressed. And then other funding, there's another appendix on, available funding and, last, I think, additional mapping, things like that for the sites inventory, so. That's, those are the changes.
So what can we expect next? Because I was just looking at the programs, I was like, oh my gosh, we are gonna have a ton of ordinances coming our way in third quarter and fourth quarter, and so.
I think maybe to think, I would look at that to say, well, are there any that we don't need or want? Or are not necessary, but also to realize that that's also the ordinances that were done are the same, almost essentially the same, maybe one or two new ones from this cycle. Still the same from the December 19th, this cycle about the previous cycle. So it is, and when you look at what has been done, what can be done, we were able to do the emergency ordinance, did the ADU, did the provision of family, but there are other ordinances like reasonable accommodation, which I have drafted up and 2152, 82 in the ordinance, it's state law, so the city follows state law and has reasonable accommodation when somebody comes in and says, I need a ramp or anything. The other ordinance was the density bonus ordinance and the improvement housing ordinance. Those are also two that were in the previous cycle. So, consideration would be, are they going to be benefiting the city, providing more affordable housing? Is it something that the city wants to take on? And also, let Alex say the other ones that are like the they're just to keep the city's ordinance up to date with the state requirements, like transitional and housing. There needs to be something that, and there's HCD has the templates online, so it's a matter of moving them forward. We reviewed most of the zoning ordinance to see what, what's non-compliant, compliant, that was a lot that was done over the last 4 years.
So what can we expect in terms of the planning commission and the council, what's gonna come next?
So the thing that, well, the good news is good news, bad news is because of the time frame. We want to get this to HCD. So what you'll see next is a notification that the document is on the web for you to review. In terms of the 6th cycle. And this is the listening sessions and trying to get as much as we can. We may try to also just put together the amended programs to get to, and I think that probably would be the easiest thing to do, and we can, circulate it through, put it on the website or send it directly to the council members on the planning commission, which is kind of what I went over today. And so then the next thing that happens is that 30-day review. We see any comments from the public and others, and then we make those revisions and we get it as soon as we possibly can to HCB to start that 90-day. That's the critical path.
Thank you for entertaining.
Yes, I think that might be it. That last call. All right, thank you very much for everything.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Denise, and that concludes our workshop. So thank you all for coming.